Who doesn't love a scoundrel? They've long been a staple of media of all sorts, that charming miscreant who operates outside the law for the best of intentions. They tended to be the most skilled of the group, because the talents they provide can't be learned by just anyone. They aren't going to fight their way out of a situation, at least fairly. They're typically the ones with all the connections. If you needed something vital, they knew a guy. That was the thief at the beginning, and now they are the rogues. And we've been watching what made them special and unique get stripped away from them in favor of the guy that gets extra dice when they attack somebody else's target. They don't even have a monopoly on the unique skills like they used to. So where did the rogue go wrong? I mean in the rules, not because he hung out with the bad crowd or took up the family business. And how did we go from the mandatory party member to just another stabby guy in light armor? My first character was a thief, and later a thief acrobat, just so everybody here knows I'm rather biased on this topic. The street vagrant Vique was one of the few survivors of the Siege of Naar, and after the battle he was recruited by the other survivors to get word to the rest of the domains of man that there was a massive army coming and war was imminent. Along the way, he redeemed a lich lord, helped an undead monk remove the curse that was keeping him from the afterlife, turned down an offer of nobility, and stole his own soul from the loom of fate. Not a bad run for a pickpocket from the Washer District. I've played rogues across every edition. I know the good and the bad of the class, having abused it and cursed at it equally. The thief was first added to the original OD&D at the behest of some of the players. It wasn't even one of the core classes. It wasn't very popular, it lacked spells, it couldn't take a hit, and it wasn't there for frontline play. But you need them to keep the rest of the party alive because of what they could do.
But what I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm talking about finding and removing traps. Yes, the thief made farting in D&D popular. Unless the DM winged it, only the thief could sneak. Only the thief could deal with traps. Only the thief could climb sure surfaces. And they were the ones that could pick up the strange scrolls and have an idea of what they were reading. And of course they could straight up rob people.
Give me cash. You got cash? Give me cash.
Oh, take it all, you dirty girl.
To top that off, they could backstab. This was effectively a once-per-combat ability that put the bad guy down hard. It was a pain to set up, but it multiplied damage. It didn't just add a few dice to the total. And you had to earn a backstab. It required you to come in at a particular angle, sneak up on the target, and bury your sword in a part of his body he would prefer to remain sword-free. It required the bad guy to be unaware of the thief being there. If the villain had a general idea of your location, they didn't even have to see you to stop the attack. That's why it was so hard to pull off, and you never got to pull it off more than once. But high risk, high reward. The biggest issue with the thief was they sucked hard early at low level. The rules for thief skills were bolted on, a percentile check system when everything else was done on a d20. The worst part was all of your typical skills, with one glaring exception, started out normally in the teens for your chance of success. Which means you aren't going to have at least a 50-50 chance to sneak, pick locks, or disarm traps until you're at least 5th level, and that's if you're dumping your increases into just that skill. There were some bonuses based on race and dexterity, but you were sucking for a good while, unless you wanted to climb things, which started at 70%, and that was the only thing you were good at first level. Fortunately for rogues, they didn't have to wait long for those skill points because they leveled up at a ridiculous rate. Clerics got to second level at 1800 XP, fighters at 2000 XP, and wizards at 2500 XP. Thieves hit level 2 at 1200. Then you got to third level before the wizard got to second level. This was back when gold pieces meant XP, so the more you stole, the faster you leveled up, which increased your skills, letting you steal more, which lets you level up faster. It was a brutal cycle, and it rewarded thieves for doing what their name suggested. Except bad checks. I tried that, walking into the Great Bank of Darrakin to cash a letter of credit for 2 million gold pieces. DM said no. Still, thieves had their butts planted firmly in the "we need you on the party" bench next to the cleric. They didn't get cool magic, they weren't hacking through hordes of enemies, but they were there to check for traps every 10 feet and die horrifically while all the other cooler classes got to do the fun stuff. Thanks to TSR loving to spring traps on people, you needed thieves. Everybody was paranoid about all the different pitfalls back then. They were deadly, they were random, and they were capricious. That's why it took an hour to walk 60 feet. The catch was, nobody else had those abilities. Even when first edition added non-weapon proficiencies, nothing duplicated what the thief could do. There were a few adjacent skills that could mimic one in very specific circumstances, but a fighter couldn't use mountaineering to climb a brick wall. One of the biggest complaints thief characters had was that several activities required multiple rolls. You had to find the trap before you could remove the trap. You had to hide in the shadows before you could move silently to be stealthy. So a double chance of failure for a lot of common thief jobs. Don't think we didn't notice it when it came time to divide up your 30 points between 8 skills. Unless you were playing Back Me, because it decided where your points were spent for you. But then came 2nd edition, and the thief got his. The complete book of Thieves gave us all the kits, and they managed to get it right. It showcased 18 different ways to play a rogue, and some of which were actually useful to a party. The class that was often the mouth of the group had options to actually give them more bonuses than just a +1 to the die roll. The kits gave you tips on how to play different versions of Thieves, even if many of them had no mechanical benefits other than some minor skill modifications. Except the Swashbuckler, with his 2.5 pages of rules, and the Buccaneer, whose special abilities got their own mention in the table of contents. It even had examples of all thief parties where everyone was a different kit and still filled a useful part of the adventure.
And do you enjoy robbing then?
Well, it helps pay the rent, sir.
It's a masterpiece of a book, and if you want to play your larcenous types better, grab a copy, even if you're not playing 2nd edition. It was written by Nephew, Niles, and Sargent, which are the TSR Voltron of quality designers. Skip to 3rd edition, and the times are a-changin'. Gone are the separate mechanics for thief skills. Now they just get more skills than everybody else by a huge margin. This means all your skills get better at the same time. Now called the Rogue, they kept their focus on stealth and light fighting, but had special rules that meant only they could handle the tougher traps. A wizard could learn Disabled Device, but they couldn't use it on traps over a certain difficulty. It just wasn't possible. You want to handle the tough jobs, you call in the professionals. The biggest change was all the skills could level up at the same time, especially if the rogue had a high intelligence. You were at least adequate at your job at all times. It highlighted the skill problem with 3.5, with rogues getting a massive 8 skill points compared to a fighter's 2. The rogue was one of the only classes that got the perception skills, making them doubly useful, as if you didn't have search as a skill, you would always suck at it.
That man is playing Galaga. Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did.
One of the biggest changes was the replacement of backstab with sneak attack. Backstabs were always difficult to pull off. Just setting one up many times was impossible. It wasn't something that could happen every combat. Between lining up the shot, being completely undetected by the target, and having to get behind them, it was a pain. The +4 to hit and the damage multiplier was amazing when you pulled it off, all the way up to a ×7 boost at the highest level. Remember, hit points weren't that high back then, so a high-level thief pulling off a surprise shot to the dragon could start off at 56 points of damage before you added in any bonuses. That's one more hit point than Strahd has for reference. Now, if you flank a target, you get some bonus damage dice. This starts off at 2d6 and goes up 1 die for every 2 levels. It's a trade-off. It's far easier to pull off, but there's no bonus to hit, and the damage doesn't scale as high. There's also a lot more monsters immune to sneak attack than backstab. Undead and most constructs are completely immune to sneak attacks. So when you're facing the Lord of Barovia, remember to have the thief stab him instead of the rogue. But then we switch to 4th edition, and all the wheels fall off the class. It might as well just been called the Striker from now on. The switch from the lovable rogue who knows how to kick a guy when he's down is gone. Instead, it's all damage bonus all the time. It was all about combat. All your abilities were either about special attacks or moving around the board to stab someone else. They did get the thieving ability, which was exclusive just to them, until Player Handbook 2 came out and introduced backgrounds that gave other people the same skill, and then everybody could do what the rogue did, because removing the exclusivity of the thieves' skills just made it another skill anybody could pick up if they wanted. It was less the Artful Dodger and more Jack the Ripper in its purpose now.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Then we go a bit back to the roots in 5th edition, at least there was some lip service paid to it. The rogues were back to being the talky one. And while people insist the bards were supposed to be the mouth of the party, rogues also got access to all 3 communication skills in Deceive, Intimidate, and Persuade. And they had 4 skill choices compared to the bard's 3, and both got the Expertise ability. The rogue gets it at level 1 compared to level 3 for the bard. And this was the only bonus any class got to talking to people mechanically. Anybody could still take the skills normally associated with the rogue. Thieves' tools were available to every paladin, druid, and monk that sent away for the Skex's Strange Hat's fully licensed locksmith correspondence course. Learning tools in 5th edition is child's play and actually has no real downside to learning them. The subclasses tried to embrace the different types of rogues and thieves that people could play. They had the classic assassin and thief from 1st edition, and of course 5th edition had to have magical martial classes, so you got the arcane trickster. And I will give them this, they didn't go wild stapling magical abilities to rogues like they did with the fighter. The rogue is equal parts combat, exploration, and diplomacy, though I'm not sure lying to people constantly as part of a con is considered diplomacy. The issue with 5th edition is it's always combat trumps everything else in the rules. Almost all of your abilities are related to not getting hit, moving around the battlefield better, and not failing skill checks. If these have a non-combat application, great. But when all the bonuses you get for going all in on talking to people or picking pockets is just double your proficiency bonus when making your test, that leaves a lot to be desired. A few examples of how to work in mechanical bonuses to your class rather than just saying, here's more numbers to add. The cut purse from 2nd edition had the ability to size up their opponent by observation. They could look at somebody and guess their true class and approximate level based on how they composed themselves, how they dressed, and what things they were stashing around their body. You could do the same thing in 5e, but you're winging it. A swindler using his persuasion skill could earn more money pulling a con than just a wizard who grabbed the skill from his background because the rogue knows how to tug at the heartstrings, already has a long list of sob stories that will get their victim to open up their purse a little bit more. It doesn't help that one of the core elements for rogues was greatly diminished in 5th, with making traps less of a threat due to the ease of detecting them with passive perception and their diminished danger. In the old days, you spent 10 minutes examining every nook and cranny of every single map square to avoid all manners of save or die literal pitfalls. Now the characters spot the traps with the character half paying attention on noticing these threats. This was largely caused by the observant feat in 5th edition, which I will give them credit for as they rightly nerfed it in 5th edition. It still gives expertise on perception, giving one of the core mechanics of the rogue to pretty much anybody. You can still game the system to auto-find traps, but it's no longer as automatic as it once was. You now have to get to level 5 to spot all the hard-to-notice traps with a dedicated build. The quick fix to this is to only allow traps of difficulty average or less to be noticed with passive perception, but making the game deadlier or more challenging is another video. There are no save or dive traps anymore. Even poison is a little more than an inconvenience because unless it's dealing damage over time, you just wait a few minutes so the negative effects that only impact combat with the poison conditions wear off. Even if it does deal damage over time, the use of a healing kit removes any risk of death if they hit 0 hit points. It's not so much as traps are easier to avoid, but when you don't see them, it's often more of just an inconvenience. So now you've got a class that serves as a glass cannon. They're to find and remove traps that aren't much of a threat anymore, surrounded by other classes that if they wanted to, they could pick up the same skills and abilities that used to be yours. One of the stated goals Wizards gave us was to remove the need for classes in a party, and that is a fair point. I played the Thief because nobody else in my first party did it, just like Amy played the Cleric because we didn't have one. That, and she was trying to hook up with the guy playing the Roguish Warrior that could rock the British accent because he was stationed at RAF Croydon, but that was about 40 years ago. The skills made the Thief unique, which made it stand out, which made it do things nobody else could do, and that was the attraction. When violence wasn't the answer, you had to rely on the Thief.
I'll steal it! No one will ever know! No one will ever know! No one will ever know!
So what's the problem, and why is this man with the sexy voice ranting about changes from 4 decades ago? This game has moved away from classic rogue archetypes like Sinbad the Sailor, the Grey Mouser, the stainless steel rat Jim Degrees, the slightly less stainless steel mouse from Ladyhawke, and Bilbo Baggins. You can still play them, but the rest of your options lean into magic, murder, and more murder. Anyone can take the skills that used to be restricted to the Thief class, even equaling them with minimal effort. Rogues take less damage for attacks and they get better saving throws at higher levels, but getting out of the way isn't much of a cornerstone to build on. Redundancy is nice. Redundancy saves lives when it comes to safety features. But when you're picking your character, it's nice to be able to do something that other people can't. There is going to be some overlap, but if everybody is capable of picking your core skills, then your particular role is diminished. Of all the classes, the rogue suffers the most from overlap, with the bard getting a pass as their whole shtick is getting elements from everyone else. Anyone can detect traps as well as them with a feat now, and wisdom casters do it even better. Their independent nature of playing the scout is countered by the need to have somebody around they can utilize for their sneak attack. The solution to the rogue is to steal from an old comic book guideline. If somebody's supposed to be good at something exclusive, or at least some obscure talent, they need to be the best at it. There needs to be something other than a simple numerical bonus to a die roll to showcase that this is something only they can do. If you're the guy that's supposed to find traps, then there needs to be a rule to showcase that you do it just a bit better. Bring back the rule that certain actions can't be attempted with skills at a certain level, restricting to those to just rogues, as they did it in 3.5. But the best suggestion, if people want to rebuild the rogue to have mechanical bonuses for the skills that got their start, base it on the Thief subclass. This isn't a new argument for 5th edition. Many people will tell you the fighter should have just been based on the battle master rather than the version they went with. Now instead of running and shanking, rogues get to use their variety of skills as bonus actions, allowing them to save the party's ass from looming deadfall and still pull their weight in action scenes. They can now work as second story men naturally, which benefits every rogue subclass. Let them attune an additional magic item. After all, they should have more than the rest, because that's what their profession does. Let them gain new skills, maybe, I don't know, additional saving throws. Leave the combat stuff at a bare minimum except for the subclasses that get paid by the head. Now wizards can focus on making the rogues that we love to play, like the acrobats, adventurers, assassins, bandits, buggers, bounty hunters, buccaneers, burglars, cut-purses, fences, investigators, scouts, smugglers, spies, swindlers, thugs, troubleshooters, or Methodists. That list can't be right. None of those can cast spells. But until next time, remember, I take care of the traps, you take care of the orcs.